Hi and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. Is this cheating? Cause she says it's not. That's the question, isn't it? The one that's been eating me alive, chewing through my insides like some kind of parasite since I got back. It's funny you spend so long thinking about one thing, one goal, and you convince yourself that once you reach it, everything else will just fall into place. For me, that goal was getting clean, getting home, getting back to her, to them, to our daughter. The life we were supposed to have, the one we started building what feels like a lifetime ago. We've been a thing for 12 years now. Well, a thing for 8 and then something else for the last 4. Something messy, chaotic, a tangled mess of strings that neither of us knows how to unravel, or maybe we just don't want to. 8 solid years. Can you even imagine that? We were kids. I was 20, she was 19. We grew up together. We learned how to be adults together. Or at least we tried to. We got our first apartment, a shoebox with a leaky faucet and neighbors who fought at 3 a.m., but it was ours. We bought our first car, a beat-up Honda that smelled like old coffee and cigarettes, but it was our ticket to everywhere. I remember the day we brought our daughter home from the hospital. I was terrified, absolutely petrified. I'd never held something so small, so perfect. I looked at her, and then I looked at my girlfriend, at the mother of my child, and I felt a love so profound, so overwhelming it felt like my chest was going to crack open. I thought, this is it. This is forever. But forever has a funny way of twisting on you, of turning into something you don't recognize. The last 4 years have been a blur of on again, off again. Breakups that lasted a week, a month, sometimes longer. Fights that started over nothing and escalated into slamming doors and words that we could never take back. And then the reconciliations, the tearful apologies, the desperate clinging to each other because the thought of being apart was more painful than the chaos of being together. We were toxic, I know that now. A perfect storm of codependency and unresolved issues. But underneath it all, there was still that love. That deep, primal connection that refused to let go. And then I started using. It wasn't a conscious decision, not really. It was a slow slide, a gradual descent into a darkness I never saw coming. It started with pills, a way to numb the noise in my head, the constant anxiety, the feeling of not being good enough. And for a while it worked. It made me feel confident, charming, the man I thought she wanted me to be. But the pills weren't enough. Soon, it was something harder, something that took me further and further away from myself, from her, from our daughter. I started disappearing. A day here, a few days there. I'd go on benders, chasing a high that was always just out of reach. I'd come back full of shame and regret, and she would be there, her eyes a mixture of anger and worry. She'd yell, she'd cry, and then she'd hold me and she'd forgive me. Every single time. And that forgiveness, it was a balm and a poison. It soothed my guilt, but it also enabled my addiction. It made it easier to slip away again, knowing she would be there when I came back. It was during one of our off periods that she started seeing him. I hated him from the moment I saw him. He was everything I was, stable, reliable. He had a decent job, a nice car. He didn't have the demons I was fighting. And he looked at her with this possessive glare like she was a prize he had won. The worst part was she still saw me. She'd sneak away to meet me. We'd hook up in my car in cheap motel rooms. It was reckless, it was stupid, and it was a betrayal to him, but in a twisted way it felt like a testament to our connection. It proved that no matter who else was in the picture, we were still us, but it was a hollow victory. It was just another layer of deceit in our already complicated lives. My addiction got worse. The disappearances became more frequent, more prolonged. I was losing myself. I was losing her. I could see the light in her eyes dimming a little more each time I came back. The worry was being replaced by a weary resignation. And our daughter, she was old enough to notice, to ask questions. "Where's Daddy?" I'd see the confusion in her eyes, the hurt. And that more than anything was what broke me. I knew I had to get help. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep putting them through this. So I made a decision. I told her I was going to rehab. We had a long talk, one of the most honest conversations we'd had in years. I laid it all out, the depth of my addiction, the shame, the fear. I told her I wanted to get clean, for me, for her, for our daughter. I told her I wanted to come home and be the man she deserved, the father our daughter needed. And then I asked her if she would wait for me. if we could try for real this time to be a family. She cried, and she said yes. She said she'd break up with him. She said she'd be there for me, that we would get through this together. We made a pact, a promise. When I got out, we would start over, a clean slate. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I believed in us again. I believed in the forever that I thought we had lost. That hope was the only thing that got me through the doors of that rehab center. The thought of her, of our daughter, of the life we were going to build, that was my North Star, my reason to fight, my reason to come back. I clung to that promise like a drowning man clings to a life raft. It was my everything. The history we have, it's not just a collection of memories, it's the very fabric of who I am. Every major milestone in my life, she was there. High school graduation, my first real job, the day I found out I was going to be a father. Her face is imprinted on every significant moment. That's what makes the last 4 years so hard to reconcile. It's like a different movie was spliced into the middle of our love story. A dark, gritty, confusing film that I keep rewatching, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. The on-again, off-again cycle was brutal. It was a roller coaster of emotions that left us both exhausted and emotionally bruised. One minute we'd be planning a future, talking about buying a house, having another kid. The next, a stupid argument over laundry or a forgotten promise would erupt into a full-blown war. We knew how to hurt each other better than anyone. We knew exactly which buttons to push, which old wounds to reopen. And we did it with a cruel precision that only comes from years of intimacy. The aftermath of those fights was always the same. A period of icy silence followed by a tentative text, a hesitant phone call. And then the floodgates would open. The apologies, the promises to do better, the desperate need to feel the comfort of each other's arms again. We were addicted to the drama, to the cycle of breaking up and making up. It was a sick kind of validation. The pain of the breakup made the reunion feel that much more intense, that much more real. My drug problem was the ultimate accelerant on this dumpster fire of a relationship. It wasn't just that I was using, it was that I was checking out. I was abdicating my responsibilities as a partner and a father. I was leaving her to handle everything on her own. The bills, the childcare, the emotional labor of holding our fragile family together. And I was lying to her, constantly, about where I was, what I was doing, how much I was using. The trust between us, already fractured, was being systematically dismantled by my addiction. When she started dating that guy, I told myself I was happy for her, that she deserved someone stable, someone who could give her the life I couldn't. But that was a lie. I was consumed with jealousy. I hated the thought of him being with her, of him playing dad to my daughter. I'd drive by his house, hoping to catch a glimpse of them, torturing myself with imagined scenarios of their perfect life together. And when she would call me, when she would agree to see me, it felt like I could breathe again. Those secret hookups were a lifeline. They were a confirmation that our bond was stronger than her new relationship, that he was just a placeholder, a temporary distraction until I got my shit together. I told myself I was fighting for us, but in reality I was just being selfish. I was keeping her tethered to me, preventing her from moving on, from finding real happiness, because I couldn't stand the thought of losing her for good. The decision to go to rehab was the hardest and easiest decision I've ever made. Hard because it meant admitting defeat, admitting that I was powerless over my addiction. Easy because I knew it was the only way to save myself, to save my family. The conversation we had before I left, it was like a scene from a movie. Raw, emotional, full of tears and promises. We talked about the good times, the 8 years of laughter and love that had been overshadowed by the last 4 years of pain. We talked about our daughter, about the kind of future we wanted for her. We created this beautiful, idealized vision of what our life would be like when I came back. I would be clean and sober, present and engaged. She would be free from the stress and worry of my addiction. We would be a team again, a proper family. She told me she would end it with the other guy that night. She said she only dated him because she was lonely and scared, because she didn't know how to fix me. But she said it was always me. It was always going to be me. We held each other for a long time that night, and it felt like the first time in years that we were truly on the same page, that we were looking in the same direction. That promise, that vision, it became my mantra in rehab. It was the light at the end of a very dark tunnel. I played that conversation over and over in my head, dissecting every word, every nuance. It was the foundation upon which I was going to rebuild my life, our life. I had no reason to doubt her. I had given her every reason to doubt me, but I never once questioned her loyalty, her love. That was my mistake. I was so focused on my own redemption, my own journey back to her, that I never stopped to consider that she might be on a journey of her own, a journey that was taking her further and further away from the future we had planned. The weight of our shared history is a heavy thing. It's an anchor that can either hold you steady in a storm or drag you down to the depths. For us, it feels like both. I think about the early days, the sheer, unadulterated joy of falling in love. We were inseparable. We finished each other's sentences. We had our own language of inside jokes and shared glances. We were a unit, a team. The world was our oyster, and we were going to conquer it together. The birth of our daughter was supposed to be the cement that solidified our bond, that made us unbreakable. And in many ways it did. It created a new dimension to our love, a shared sense of purpose and responsibility. But it also introduced a new level of stress, of pressure. We were no longer just a couple, we were parents. And the cracks in our foundation, the ones we had ignored or papered over, started to show. The on-again, off-again phase was a symptom of a deeper problem. We didn't know how to communicate. We didn't know how to resolve conflict in a healthy way. We were both carrying around our own baggage from our childhoods, our own insecurities and fears. And instead of working through them together, we used them as weapons against each other. My drug use wasn't the cause of our problems, but it was the gasoline poured on an already raging fire. It gave me an excuse to escape, to not deal with the mess we had created. It amplified my worst traits, my selfishness, my dishonesty, my unreliability. I became a ghost in my own life, a shadow of the man I used to be, the man she fell in love with. The pain I caused her during that time, it's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. I see it in the way she looks at me sometimes, a flicker of old hurt in her eyes. I hear it in the way she hesitates before answering a question, a lingering doubt about my honesty. I put her through hell, I know that. I abandoned her repeatedly to chase my own selfish desires. So when she got with that other guy, a part of me, a small, rational part, understood. She needed stability. She needed someone she could count on. But the bigger, more irrational part of me, the part that was still deeply in love with her, saw it as the ultimate betrayal. How could she replace me? How could she let another man into our life, into our daughter's life? The hypocrisy is not lost on me. I was the one disappearing for days on end, leaving her to wonder if I was dead or alive. And yet, I was furious that she had found someone else to lean on. The clandestine hookups were my way of reasserting my claim on her, of reminding her and myself that I was still number one. It was a power play, a desperate attempt to maintain control in a life that was spiraling out of control. When we made that pact before I left for rehab, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in years. It felt like we were finally closing the chapter on the chaos and starting a new one, a better one. I was so naive. I thought that my decision to get clean would magically solve all of our problems. I thought that by fixing myself, I could fix us. I envisioned my homecoming as this triumphant moment, a hero's return. I would be the prodigal son, welcomed back with open arms, forgiven for all my past transgressions. We would pick up right where we left off, but better, stronger, healthier. I was so caught up in my own narrative of redemption that I failed to see her as a separate person with her own needs, her own desires, her own pain. I saw her as a part of my story, the reward at the end of my journey. I didn't consider that while I was away, she would be living her own life, making her own choices, dealing with her own demons. That promise we made, it was a beautiful sentiment, a noble goal. But it was built on a shaky foundation, a foundation of unresolved issues and unspoken resentments. It was a promise that was destined to be broken, because we were two broken people trying to fix each other, when what we really needed to do was fix ourselves. The idea of us has been the central theme of my life for so long, it's hard to imagine an existence without it. We've been interwoven for 12 years, our lives a complex tapestry of shared experiences, inside jokes and mutual friends. Our families are intertwined. Our daughter is the living embodiment of our union. To separate would be like trying to unscramble an egg. It's a daunting, almost impossible task. That's why we always came back to each other. The comfort of the familiar, even a dysfunctional familiar, was less terrifying than the prospect of starting over, of being alone. We were each other's security blanket and we were each other's kryptonite. The cycle of our breakups was predictable, almost ritualistic. A blow-up fight, a dramatic exit, a few weeks of radio silence where we both pretended to be fine, to be moving on. And then the inevitable crack. A late-night text saying, "I miss you." A chance encounter at a place we used to frequent. And just like that, we'd be pulled back into the vortex, promising that this time would be different. But it never was. We were stuck in a loop, repeating the same mistakes, having the same fights because we never addressed the root cause of our problems. My addiction was the ultimate manifestation of our dysfunction. It was a symptom of a much deeper malaise. I was unhappy, I was unfulfilled, and I didn't know how to fix it. So I chose to numb it instead. And in doing so, I inflicted so much pain on the people I loved most. I remember the look on my daughter's face when I would resurface after a bender. It was a mixture of relief and confusion, of happiness that I was back and fear that I would leave again. No child should have to look at their father that way. That image is burned into my brain, a constant reminder of the damage I've done. The other guy, he was a symbol of everything I wasn't. He was a constant reminder of my failures as a man, as a partner, as a father. I demonized him in my mind, turned him into this villain who was trying to steal my family. But in reality, he was just a guy who was offering her something I couldn't, consistency, and I couldn't stand it. The fact that she was still sleeping with me while she was with him, it fed my ego, it validated my sense of superiority. It made me feel like I was still the one in control, even though my life was anything but. I was using her just as much as I was using drugs to fill a void within myself. The pact we made before rehab, it was a fairy tale. It was a story we told ourselves because the reality was too painful to face. The reality was that our relationship was in tatters, held together by a thread of shared history and a child we both adored. My getting clean was a necessary first step, but it wasn't a magic wand. It couldn't erase the years of hurt, of betrayal, of neglect. I went into rehab with this single-minded focus. Get clean, get her back. I put her on a pedestal, made her the prize at the end of the finish line. I didn't see her as a complex, flawed human being who was struggling with her own pain, her own trauma. I saw her as an extension of myself, the key to my own happiness. I expected her to put her life on hold, to wait for me, to be the ever-faithful, ever-forgiving partner she had always been. I didn't consider the possibility that she might be tired of waiting, tired of forgiving. I didn't consider that while I was away, working on myself, she might be doing the same, and that her path to healing might not lead back to me. The promise was a beautiful lie, and I was all too willing to believe it. Rehab was like stepping into another world, a bubble of forced introspection and uncomfortable truths. The first few days were a living hell. The detox was brutal, my body rebelling against the sudden absence of the poison I'd been feeding it for so long. Every muscle ached, my head pounded, and I was drowning in a cold sweat that smelled of regret. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental anguish. Stripped of my chemical crutch, I was left alone with my thoughts, my failures, my shame. And they were relentless. The only thing that kept me going in those early days was the promise. Her face, our daughter's face, they were the images I conjured in my mind when the craving hit, when the despair threatened to swallow me whole. I pictured our reunion, the feel of their arms around me, the smell of our daughter's hair. That was my reason. That was my why. Communication with the outside world was limited, but our weekly phone calls were my lifeline. I lived for those 10-minute conversations. I'd wait by the payphone, my heart pounding in my chest, rehearsing what I was going to say, trying to cram a week's worth of emotions and progress into a few precious minutes. Hearing her voice was like a hit of the purest drug I'd ever known. It was a reminder of what was waiting for me on the other side, a confirmation that I wasn't alone in this fight. She told me she was proud of me. She told me to stay strong. She told me they missed me. And I clung to those words like a rosary, repeating them to myself in the long, dark hours of the night. During one of our calls, about 2 weeks in, she told me she had done it. She had broken up with him. She said it was hard, that he was hurt, but that she had to be honest with him, with herself. She said she told him about our plan, about our promise to start over. And when she told me that, a wave of relief so powerful washed over me, I thought my knees would buckle. It was real. It was happening. She was holding up her end of the bargain. All I had to do was hold up mine. That phone call was a turning point for me. It solidified my resolve. I threw myself into the program. I went to every meeting, every therapy session. I opened up in group, sharing things I had never said out loud before, things I had barely admitted to myself. I talked about my childhood, my insecurities, the deep-seated fear of not being good enough that had driven me to seek validation in drugs and in the chaotic cycle of my relationship with her. I started to understand the why behind my addiction, the gaping hole in my soul that I had been trying to fill with all the wrong things. And with that understanding came a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wrote her letters, long, rambling letters that I would probably be embarrassed to read now. I poured my heart out onto those pages, my hopes, my dreams, my fears. I told her about the things I was learning about myself. I made promises, not the empty, desperate promises of an active addict, but real, concrete commitments to be a better man, a better partner, a better father. I told her I was doing this for us. I was building a new foundation for our family, a foundation of honesty and sobriety. And she wrote back. Her letters were shorter, less effusive than mine, but they were full of support and encouragement. She sent me pictures of our daughter, drawings she had made for me. I taped them to the wall next to my bed, a little shrine to the life I was fighting to get back to. Those pictures were the first thing I saw when I woke up, and the last thing I saw before I went asleep. I started to plan for the future, our future, with an almost obsessive level of detail. I imagined our new life together. We'd get a new place, a fresh start. We'd have family dinners every night. We'd go to the park on weekends. We'd be normal. The kind of happy, boring, normal family I used to scoff at but now craved with every fiber of my being. I was building this perfect little snow globe in my mind, a pristine world where all the messiness and pain of the past had been wiped away. And at the center of that snow globe was her, smiling, happy, proud of the man I had become. My therapist tried to warn me in his gentle, therapeutic way. He told me to focus on my own recovery, to not pin all my hopes on one person or one outcome. He said that expectations could be dangerous, that I needed to be prepared for the reality of life outside the rehab bubble. I listened, I nodded, but I didn't really hear him. I couldn't. My vision of a perfect future with her was the engine driving my recovery. To entertain the possibility that it might not happen, that it might not be the fairy tale I had imagined, felt like a betrayal. It felt like giving up. So I held onto my snow globe, shaking it every now and then to watch the glittery flakes of my idealized future swirl around her. I was so in love with the idea of us, the redeemed, reborn version of us, that I failed to see the cracks that were already forming in the glass. The 90 days I spent in rehab felt like an eternity and a blink of an eye all at once. It was a crash course in self-discovery, a painful but necessary process of tearing myself down to the studs and starting to rebuild. The days were structured, regimented, a stark contrast to the chaotic, unpredictable life I had been living. And in that structure I found a strange kind of freedom. Freedom from the constant chase, the endless cycle of getting high, coming down, and figuring out how to get high again. Freedom from the lies, the secrets, the crushing weight of my own deceit. In group therapy, I was surrounded by people from all walks of life, all with their own stories of hitting rock bottom. But we all spoke the same language, the language of addiction, of loss, of a desperate, flickering hope for something better. For the first time, I didn't feel like a freak, like a lost cause. I felt understood. I listened to their stories and I saw pieces of my own. I saw the same patterns of self-destruction, the same justifications, the same trail of broken relationships and shattered trust. And in their vulnerability, I found the courage to be vulnerable myself. I talked about her, about our 12-year saga, about the daughter I was terrified of losing. I talked about the guilt, the overwhelming guilt of knowing I had put them through so much pain. And the guys in my group, they got it. They didn't judge me. They just nodded, and some of them shared their own stories of an ex-wife, a lost love, a child they hadn't seen in years. It was a sobering reminder of what was at stake. My weekly phone calls with her were the highlight of my week. I'd count down the days, the hours, the minutes. The sound of her voice was a direct link to the world I was fighting to return to. It was a reminder that my life wasn't just this sterile, therapeutic environment. There was a real world out there, a real family waiting for me. After she told me she'd broken up with the other guy, our calls took on a different tone. They were more intimate, more hopeful. We started talking about the future in more concrete terms. She'd tell me about apartments she'd seen online, about a new school she was thinking of for our daughter. We were making plans, real plans. It felt like we were a team again, working towards a common goal. I was on a pink cloud, as they call it in recovery. I was high on hope, high on the promise of a second chance. I was so sure that this was it, that we were finally going to get it right. I was so focused on my own transformation that I didn't pay much attention to the subtle shifts in her, the things that, in retrospect, were glaring red flags. The way she would sometimes get quiet on the phone, the way she would change the subject when I got too deep into my feelings or my plans for our future. I attributed it to stress, to the difficulty of being a single mom while I was away. I told myself that once I was home, once I could take some of the pressure off her, everything would be fine. I was writing our reunion story in my head, and it was a masterpiece of schmaltzy, romantic fiction. I would walk through the door, a new man, tan and healthy from all the outdoor activities at the rehab facility. She would run into my arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. Our daughter would be there, a little shy at first, but then she would break into a smile and yell, "Daddy." We would be a perfect family, a walking advertisement for the power of redemption and the enduring strength of love. I cringe now thinking about how naive I was. I was living in a fantasy world, a world of my own creation, where all the complexities and messiness of real life had been neatly edited out. My therapist's words about managing expectations would echo in my head from time to time, but I would push them away. I needed that fantasy. I needed that perfect ending to keep me going. It was the carrot at the end of a very long, very painful stick. The last few weeks of my program were filled with a nervous excitement. I was so close. I could taste it. I felt like a coiled spring ready to be launched back into my life. I had my discharge plan all mapped out. I had a list of meetings to attend, a sponsor on standby. I had a job interview lined up for the week after I got back. I was ready. I was going to be the man I had promised her I would be. The night before I was discharged, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I was thinking about our first kiss, the day our daughter was born, the feel of her hand in mine. I was replaying all the good memories, the ones that had been buried under the rubble of the last few years. I was resurrecting the man I used to be, the man she fell in love with. I was so full of hope, so full of love for her, for our daughter, for our future. I was completely and utterly blind to the reality that was waiting for me. I was a man walking out of a dark cave, blinking in the sunlight, convinced he was heading towards paradise, when in reality he was walking straight off a cliff. The bubble of rehab is a strange and powerful thing. It insulates you from the real world, from the triggers and temptations and messy human relationships that got you there in the first place. Inside that bubble, everything is simple. You have one job: get sober. You're surrounded by people who are all working towards the same goal, a built-in support system that understands your struggle because they're living it too. I thrived in that environment. I was a model patient. I was insightful in therapy, supportive in group, and I worked the steps with a fervor that impressed even my counselor. I was convinced I had cracked the code, that I had figured out the secret to a happy, sober life. And the secret, I believed, was her. She was my higher power, my reason for being. My sobriety was inextricably linked to our reconciliation. In my mind, the two were one and the same. If I got her back, I would stay sober. It was that simple. This is what my therapist would call externalizing my recovery, putting the responsibility for my sobriety onto someone else. It's a dangerous and common pitfall for people in early recovery, but I couldn't see it at the time. I was so blinded by my love for her, by my desperate need to put my family back together, that I made her the cornerstone of my entire recovery. The letters and phone calls were the fuel for my fantasy. I would read her words over and over, analyzing every phrase, searching for hidden meanings, for further proof that she was as invested in this reunion as I was. When she sent me a drawing from our daughter that said, "I miss you, Daddy," I broke down and cried. It was a tangible piece of the life I was fighting for, a reminder of the innocent, beautiful reason I had to stay the course. I was building a narrative in my head, a story of epic love and redemption. We were the star-crossed lovers, torn apart by the demon of addiction, but destined to be reunited, stronger and more in love than ever before. I was the hero of this story, the man who had conquered his demons and was returning to claim his rightful place as the head of his family. She was the princess in the tower, patiently waiting for her knight in shining armor to rescue her. It was a childish, simplistic, and deeply flawed narrative, but it was the only thing that made sense to me at the time. It was the only way I could process the trauma and chaos of the past few years. I needed a happy ending. I needed to believe that all the pain, all the suffering, had been for a reason, that it was all part of a larger plan that would ultimately lead us back to each other. I didn't want to think about the gray areas, the complexities, the possibility that she might have her own story, her own narrative, and that in her story I might not be the hero. I might be the villain. I remember one of our last phone calls before I got out. I was telling her about all my plans, about the job interview, about how I was going to make everything up to her. And there was this pause on the other end of the line, a silence that felt just a little too long. And then she said, "Just focus on staying sober, that's the most important thing." At the time, I took it as a sign of her love and support, but looking back, I can hear the hesitation in her voice, the note of caution. She wasn't buying into the fairy tale as fully as I was. She was living in the real world, a world where promises were broken and happy endings were not guaranteed. I was so wrapped up in my own head, so high on the prospect of my impending release that I missed it. I heard what I wanted to hear. I saw what I wanted to see. The day I walked out of that facility, I felt like I was on top of the world. I had done it. I had faced my demons and won. I had a new lease on life, a new set of tools to deal with my problems. I was ready to be the man I was always meant to be. I got on the bus, my duffel bag in my lap, and I stared out the window, watching the world go by. Everything looked brighter, more vibrant. I felt a sense of hope so profound it was almost painful. I was heading home. I was heading back to her. The prodigal son was returning, and I had no doubt that a feast was being prepared in my honor. The tragic irony is that while I was in rehab, deconstructing my own addictive patterns, I was simultaneously constructing a new addiction. An addiction to a fantasy, an obsession with an idealized future that existed only in my mind. Every day that I spent getting clean was a day that I spent reinforcing this delusion. I was so proud of my progress, so sure that I was on the right path. But I was walking down that path with blinders on, unable to see the warning signs, the red flags, the inconvenient truths that didn't fit into my perfect narrative. My communication with her was filtered through my own desperate need for reassurance. I projected my own hopes and dreams onto her, interpreting her words and actions in a way that supported my fantasy. When she said, "I'm proud of you," I heard, "I can't wait for you to come home so we can live happily ever after." When she said, "Take it one day at a time," I heard, "Our future is secure, so just focus on the present." I was translating her reality into my fantasy language. The 90 days I was away was a long time. A lot can happen in 3 months. People can change. Feelings can change. While I was in a protected, structured environment, focused solely on my own self-improvement, she was out in the real world, dealing with the fallout of my addiction, raising our daughter on her own, and trying to figure out her own life. I expected her to be in a state of suspended animation, just waiting for me to return and press play on our life together. It never occurred to me that she might be moving on, that she might be creating a new life for herself, a life that didn't necessarily have a place for me in it. The pictures she sent, the supportive letters, the hopeful phone calls, I see now that they were her way of encouraging my recovery, of being the supportive partner she felt she should be. But they weren't a contract. They weren't a guarantee. I mistook her support for my sobriety as a recommitment to our relationship. In my self-centered, addict brain, the two were synonymous. How could she be proud of me for getting clean if she didn't want to be with the new, clean me? The logic seemed infallible. I was so focused on the grand gesture of getting sober that I thought it would absolve me of all my past sins. I thought it was a get out of jail free card, a reset button on our entire relationship. I didn't understand that sobriety is just the first step. It's the price of admission back into a normal life. It doesn't magically heal the wounds you've inflicted on others. It doesn't instantly rebuild the trust you've spent years demolishing. The hope that sustained me in rehab was a double-edged sword. It got me through the darkest days. It gave me a reason to keep fighting. But it also blinded me to the truth. It set me up for a fall that was more devastating than any drug-induced crash I had ever experienced. I was so busy building my castle in the sky that I didn't realize it was built on a foundation of sand, and the tide was already coming in. The man who walked out of rehab was a man full of hope, but it was a fragile, naive hope, a hope that was about to be shattered into a million pieces. The bus ride home was the longest 3 hours of my life. I was practically vibrating with anticipation. I had my homecoming speech prepared, a heartfelt monologue about my journey, my gratitude, my love for her. I pictured the scene 1,000 times in my head, each version more perfect than the last. When I finally walked up the path to our front door, the door I hadn't seen in 3 months, my heart was pounding a drum solo against my ribs. I took a deep breath, pasted on a confident smile, and knocked. The door swung open, and there she was. She looked tired. That was the first thing I noticed. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her smile didn't quite reach them, but she was there. She was real. She hugged me, a quick, almost perfunctory hug that felt different from the desperate, clinging embraces of our past. I told myself it was just awkwardness, the strangeness of seeing each other after so long. Then our daughter came running out, and for a few minutes, everything was perfect. She jumped into my arms, and I held her tight, burying my face in her hair, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent of her. For those few moments, I was just a dad home with his little girl. The snow globe was intact. The first few days were a strange dance of feigned normalcy. We were like two actors in a play, reading our lines, hitting our marks, but with no real emotion behind it. We talked about my time in rehab, but only in superficial terms. We talked about her work, our daughter's school. We avoided the big stuff, the important stuff. We didn't talk about us. I tried to bring it up a few times to have that big, cathartic conversation I had been rehearsing for months, but she would always deflect, change the subject, or say she was too tired. There was a wall between us, an invisible barrier that I couldn't seem to break through. I told myself to be patient. She had been through a lot. I had put her through a lot. It was going to take time to rebuild the intimacy, the trust. I was a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around, afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. I was sleeping on the couch. She said it was to give me space to ease back into things slowly. It felt more like a rejection, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance between us. Still, I tried. I went to meetings every day. I got a job, a shitty construction gig, but it was a paycheck. I helped around the house. I was the model of a responsible, sober man. I was doing everything right, but something was wrong, deeply wrong. It was the little things at first. The way she would guard her phone, angling it away from me when she was texting. The way she would take calls in another room, closing the door behind her. The unexplained absences, the vague answers to my questions about where she had been. It was a familiar pattern, a dance I knew all too well, because it was my dance. It was the same shit I used to do to her. My mind started to race. Was I being paranoid? Was this some kind of post-rehab hypervigilance, a projection of my own past behavior onto her? Or was my gut, the gut I had ignored for so long, trying to tell me something? I started to feel like I was going crazy. I would oscillate between trusting her completely, telling myself I was being ridiculous, and being consumed by a gut-wrenching suspicion that I was being played for a fool. The strange behavior escalated. She started looking different. Her eyes were often glassy, her pupils like pinpricks. She was losing weight at an alarming rate. She was agitated, fidgety, her mood swinging wildly from euphoric highs to crushing lows. I knew the signs. I was an expert in the signs, but I didn't want to believe it. My brain couldn't process it. The woman I had put on a pedestal, the woman who was the symbol of my clean and sober life, the woman who was worried about my drug problem, was she using? It seemed impossible, a cruel joke. The turning point came one night when she was in the shower. Her phone, which was usually glued to her hand, was on the nightstand. I stared at it, my heart hammering in my chest. A voice in my head was screaming at me, "Don't do it, trust her, this will destroy everything." But another, louder voice, the voice of a man who had been lied to and who had lied too many times, said, "You need to know." I picked it up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type in the passcode, the same one she'd had for years, our daughter's birthday, and then I was in. I felt a wave of shame and self-loathing wash over me. I was betraying her trust, violating her privacy, but I couldn't stop. I opened her messages, and there it was. My perfectly crafted snow globe, my beautiful fantasy, shattered into a million tiny, razor-sharp pieces. The messages were from a guy named D, and they were graphic, explicit. Sexting, pictures, plans to meet up. My stomach lurched. I felt like I was going to be sick. This was the guy she was seeing while I was away. No, she said she broke up with him. I kept scrolling, my blood running cold. The dates on the messages were from the past few weeks, from after I got home. There were messages from that very day. And then I saw the words that stopped my heart. Words about Tina, about getting more, about how good it felt. Tina, meth. My girlfriend, the mother of my child, was on meth, and she was sleeping with her dealer. I scrolled back, frantically, desperately trying to make sense of it all. I went back months, back to when I was in rehab. The sexting was happening then too. While I was pouring my heart out in letters, while I was on the phone with her, crying about how much I missed her, she was sending naked pictures to this guy. I found a message from March, a confirmation that they had hooked up, that she had gone to his place. It only happened one time, she would later tell me. One time in March, but it was June. And the messages, the sexting, it was still happening, right under my nose, in my home, while I was sleeping on the couch dreaming of our perfect future. I sat there on the edge of the bed, the phone in my hand, and I felt nothing. A profound, terrifying emptiness. The shock was so great it was like a system overload, a short circuit in my brain. The man who had walked out of rehab, full of hope and love, died in that moment. And in his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone cold and hard and broken. I heard the shower turn off. I didn't move. She walked into the room, a towel wrapped around her, and she saw me, saw the phone in my hand, saw the look on my face. And she knew. The color drained from her face. The confrontation was a blur. There was yelling, crying, accusations. And then the excuses, the justifications. "It wasn't cheating," she said, her voice small, defiant. "We weren't officially together. The words hung in the air, a slap in the face so visceral I almost flinched. Not officially together. What about the promise? What about the pact? What about the future we had been planning for 3 months? I didn't know what you were gonna do, she said. I didn't know if you were really going to stay clean. I was scared. And then the one that cut the deepest. And I was bored. While I was fighting for my life, fighting for our family, she was bored. So she started doing meth and fucking her dealer. It was all so sordid, so sleazy, so far removed from the pristine image I had held of her in my mind. She was not the princess in the tower. She was just another addict, caught in her own web of lies and self-destruction. And in that moment, I saw our reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, I realized just how broken we both were. The fragile hope I had carried home with me was gone, replaced by the ugly, brutal, devastating truth. The quiet before the storm was the most unsettling part. Those first few days back, living in a state of suspended reality where we were both pretending everything was fine. It was like walking on eggshells on a frozen lake, the ice groaning and cracking beneath my feet with every tentative step. I was so desperate for the fantasy to be real that I was willing to ignore the mounting evidence to the contrary. Her physical distance, her emotional unavailability, her obsessive secrecy with her phone. Every red flag was waving furiously in my face, but I chose to see them as confetti, celebrating my return. The sleep I lost during that period, it was a different kind of insomnia than the drug-fueled nights of my past. This was a sober, clear-headed torment. I'd lie on that couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind a relentless hamster wheel of suspicion and self-doubt. Am I crazy? Am I just a jealous, insecure asshole projecting my own shit onto her? I'd ask myself over and over. I was gaslighting myself, trying to convince myself that the reality I was sensing wasn't real, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. The moment I picked up her phone, I knew there was no going back. It was a line being crossed, a Rubicon of trust. I knew that if I found something, it would change everything. And if I didn't, I would have to live with the knowledge that I was the kind of man who would do that I had so little faith in the person I claimed to love. But the need to know, the gnawing, cancerous suspicion, it was stronger than my principles. It was a primal urge to protect myself from being made a fool of. The feeling of my world collapsing as I scrolled through those messages is something I will never be able to adequately describe. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was a complete and utter annihilation of my reality. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my entire recovery around, was a stranger. And not just a stranger, but a liar, a cheat, a drug addict. The betrayal was multi-layered, a grotesque cake of deceit. There was the sexual betrayal, the knowledge that she had been with someone else, that she had shared an intimacy with him that was supposed to be ours. There was the emotional betrayal, the fact that she had been carrying on this secret life while I was baring my soul to her, trusting her with my most vulnerable hopes and dreams. And then there was the ultimate betrayal, the one that made it all so much worse, the drugs. She knew better than anyone the hell I had just been through. She had seen me at my lowest, a slave to my addiction. And while I was in rehab fighting to escape that hell, she had willingly walked into her own, and she had brought it into our home, into the home where our daughter slept. The confrontation was ugly, pathetic. She cycled through a series of defenses, each one more infuriating than the last. First came the denial. It's not what it looks like. Then the minimization. It only happened once. Then the blame shifting. You were gone. I was lonely. You drove me to this. And finally, the semantic argument, the one that made my blood boil. We weren't officially together, so it doesn't count as cheating. It was a masterclass in addict behavior, and I recognized it immediately because I had used all the same tactics myself. I had been the one to lie, to deny, to minimize, to blame. To see my own manipulative bullshit thrown back in my face was a surreal and profoundly unpleasant experience. The claim that she was bored was the most insulting of all. It was such a trivial, selfish reason for such a catastrophic betrayal. It cheapened everything. Our 12 years of history, our daughter, my life-or-death struggle with addiction. It was all less important than her fleeting need for a little excitement. As the initial shock wore off, it was replaced by a tidal wave of emotions. Rage. A white-hot, blinding rage that made me want to punch a hole in the wall. Grief, a deep, soul-crushing sadness for the future I had lost, the family I had failed to save. And underneath it all, a strange and terrible sense of pity. I looked at her, this woman who was a stranger to me, this woman who was high on meth and talking nonsense, and I felt sorry for her. She was lost, just as lost as I had been. We were two junkies, each with our own drug of choice. Mine was chemicals, hers was chaos, and now it was chemicals too. The discovery didn't just break my heart. It broke my sobriety. Not in the sense that I went out and used, but it shattered the foundation on which it was built. My sobriety was built on her, on us. And with that foundation gone, I was in free fall. My North Star had disappeared from the sky, and I was lost in a dark and starless night, with no idea which way to go. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I had gone to rehab to save our family, but in doing so, I had simply uncovered the fact that our family was already broken beyond repair. I had gone away a drug addict in love with a woman I thought I knew, and I had come home a sober man, to a drug addict I didn't recognize at all. The home I had been dreaming of for 90 days had become a house of horrors overnight. The air was thick with lies and betrayal. Every corner of every room seemed to mock me, a reminder of the naive fantasy I had so carefully constructed. I'd look at the family photos on the wall, the smiling faces from a happier time, and they felt like images from someone else's life. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunting the ruins of a life that no longer existed. The discovery of her meth use was a game changer. It elevated the situation from a simple case of infidelity to a full-blown crisis. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about danger. This was about the safety and well-being of our daughter. The thought of her being high around our child, the thought of this dealer, this predator, being a part of our lives, it filled me with a terror that was colder and sharper than any anger I had ever felt. I felt a surge of protective instinct, a primal need to get my daughter out of there, to shield her from the poison that had seeped into our home. The argument we had that night was a circular, nonsensical nightmare. It was like trying to reason with a funhouse mirror. Her logic was warped, her perception of reality distorted by the drugs and her own self-serving justifications. Her insistence that it wasn't cheating because we weren't officially together was the hill she was willing to die on. It was her loophole, her get-out-of-jail-free card. And the more she repeated it, the more meaningless the words became. Officially together. What did that even mean? We had a child together. We had 12 years of history together. We had made a promise to get back together. Was that not official enough? Her excuse that she was scared and didn't know if I would stay clean, that was the one that gave me pause, because there was a kernel of truth to it. I had given her no reason to trust me. I had a long and well-documented history of letting her down, of choosing drugs over her. Why should she have believed that this time would be any different? I had asked her to take a leap of faith, to bet on me the long shot, and she had hedged her bet. The problem was she didn't just hedge her bet. She cashed in her chips and moved to a different casino, a much seedier, more dangerous casino, and she had lied about it every step of the way. She had let me believe that she was all in, that she was waiting for me, that we were on the same team. She had watched me build my house of hope, knowing full well that it was situated on a sinkhole. The revelation that the sexting had been going on while I was in rehab was a special kind of cruelty. I thought about all those heartfelt letters I had written, all those vulnerable, tearful phone calls. I had been opening my veins and pouring my soul out to her, and on the other end of the line, she was living a double life. She was my confidant and my betrayer, my supporter and my saboteur. The sheer duplicity of it was breathtaking. I felt like a fool, a naive, pathetic fool. I had been so wrapped up in my own redemption story that I had cast her in the role of the supportive, long-suffering partner. It never occurred to me that she might have her own script, a script in which she was the star, and I was just a supporting character, a plot device in her own drama. The discovery was a brutal but necessary awakening. It shattered my illusions and forced me to see the truth, not just about her, but about us. We were not the epic love story I had imagined. We were a tragedy, a long, slow, painful tragedy, and we were both to blame for the wreckage. The trust between us wasn't just broken, it was vaporized. It had ceased to exist. And I knew in that moment with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it could never be rebuilt. The foundation was not just cracked, it was gone. And all that was left was a gaping, empty hole where our future was supposed to be. So here I am, back in the house but not at home, living in the fallout, breathing in the toxic air of what's left of our life together. I'm sleeping on the couch, a constant physical reminder of the chasm that has opened up between us. We're roommates who share a child and a whole lot of bad history. We talk, but we don't communicate. We exchange information about our daughter's schedule, about bills that need to be paid. But we don't talk about the elephant in the room. We don't talk about the dealer, the meth, the lies. We don't talk about the fact that our relationship is a smoking crater. I'm trying to look past it. That's what I tell myself. I'm trying to look past it because she looked past my shit for so long. She forgave me for disappearing, for doing drugs for days on end. She always took me back, always gave me another chance. Who am I to be self-righteous? Who am I to cast the first stone? I have a rap sheet of betrayals a mile long. I lied to her, I stole from her, I abandoned her over and over again. My addiction turned me into a monster, a selfish, destructive force that laid waste to everything good in our lives. So doesn't she deserve the same grace she always gave me? Doesn't she deserve a second chance? That's the argument I have with myself, 1,000 times a day. It's a circular, torturous debate that has no end. One part of me, the part that still loves her, the part that remembers the 19-year-old girl I fell in love with, wants to forgive. It wants to believe that this was a mistake, a cry for help, a symptom of the pain I caused her. It wants to believe that we can get through this, that we can both get clean and sober and finally build the life we were supposed to have. But then there's the other part of me, the part that is shattered and betrayed, the part that can't unsee those messages, that can't unknow what she did. And that part of me is screaming that this is different. My addiction was a disease, a compulsion that took over my brain. I was sick. What she did, it feels like a choice. A series of conscious, deliberate choices. She chose to seek out this dealer. She chose to sleep with him. She chose to try meth. She chose to lie to me every single day for months. And that distinction between a sickness and a choice, it feels important. But maybe I'm just trying to justify my own hypocrisy. Maybe addiction is addiction and the specifics don't matter. And then there's the central question, the one that started this whole mess, the one she keeps throwing in my face whenever I try to talk about the betrayal. Was it cheating? She's adamant that it was. Her logic is simple, infuriatingly so. We were not officially together. And on a technicality, she's right. We were on a break that I initiated by being a drug addict who had to go to rehab. But we had a pact, we had a plan, we had a future that we had both agreed upon. Doesn't that count for anything? Doesn't an emotional commitment, a promise to rebuild, doesn't that make us officially together in a way that matters more than a Facebook status? Or am I just a romantic idiot who believes in promises that have no legal standing? I feel like I'm losing my mind, trying to navigate the semantics of betrayal. She says she didn't know what I was going to do, that she was hedging her bets. And I get that. I do. I was a risky bet. But you don't hedge a bet by setting the casino on fire. You don't protect yourself from potential heartbreak by actively seeking out a new, more dangerous kind of heartbreak. And the fact that it was with her dealer, that's the part I can't get past. This wasn't a random guy she met at a bar. This was a predator, a man who profits from the misery and addiction of others. He saw her vulnerability, her loneliness, and he exploited it. He sent her a few dirty texts and a dick pic, and that was all it took. He got her over there, got her high, and got what he wanted. He didn't care about her. He saw her as a customer, a conquest. And she let him. She invited that darkness into her life, into our daughter's life. That, to me, is so much more than cheating. It's a betrayal of a different magnitude. It's a betrayal of her own self-worth, of her responsibility as a mother. And that scares me more than any infidelity. I'm trying to be the bigger person here. I'm trying to be the sober, rational one. I know that her meth use is the real enemy. Her addiction is the problem, not this sleazy dealer, not even the cheating. I know that she's sick just like I was, and she needs help. But I am so drowning in my own hurt, my own anger, that I can't find the strength to be her savior. I just spent 90 days saving myself. I don't know if I have it in me to save her too. And there's a part of me, a dark, selfish part that doesn't want to. A part of me that wants her to feel the same pain she caused me. A part of me that wants to walk away, to take our daughter and never look back. But then I look at our daughter and I see her and I see me. And I know that I can't abandon her. I can't let her be consumed by this disease. I can't let our daughter lose another parent to addiction. So I'm stuck. I'm trapped in this limbo of love and hate, of forgiveness and resentment. I'm trying to look past it, but every time I look at her, I see the messages. I see the lies. I see the stranger she has become. And I wonder if the woman I fell in love with is gone forever, replaced by this ghost who walks our halls and sleeps in our bed but is a million miles away. Is this cheating? Or is it something worse? Is it a symptom of a sickness that is far more deadly than a simple betrayal? And if I forgive her for this, am I being a good, compassionate man, or am I just being a fool, setting myself up for another, even more devastating fall? I don't have the answers. I honestly don't. I'm just a guy trying to stay sober, trying to be a good dad, and trying to figure out if the love of his life is worth saving or if she's already too far gone. The aftermath of a bomb going off is a strange and silent place. The explosion is loud, violent, chaotic. But the moments after, when the dust is settling, there's an eerie quiet. That's where I'm living now. In the quiet, dusty, radioactive aftermath of my life blowing up. I walk around the house and it's like a museum of a life I used to have. Every object holds a memory, a ghost. The chipped coffee mug she bought me on our first anniversary. The framed photo of us in the hospital with our newborn daughter. The stupid, fluffy pillows on the couch that she insisted on buying. They're all artifacts from a different time, a different reality. Now, they just feel like evidence in a crime scene. I'm grappling with this impossible equation, trying to balance the scales of our respective wrongdoings. On one side, you have my years of addiction, my lies, my disappearances, a mountain of betrayal. On the other side, you have her infidelity, her lies, her drug use, a smaller but more concentrated, more volatile mountain of betrayal. Does my mountain negate hers? Does her forgiveness of my past sins obligate me to forgive her present ones? It's a moral calculus that is breaking my brain. I'm trying to see it from her perspective. I was gone. She was alone, scared, raising a child by herself, dealing with the emotional wreckage I had left behind. She was vulnerable. And this guy, this dealer, he offered her an escape. A cheap, easy, temporary escape from her reality. I understand the temptation. I, of all people, understand the seductive whisper of a chemical solution to a spiritual problem. But understanding it and accepting it are two very different things. My forgiveness of her in the past, it was always rooted in the belief that her love for me was unwavering. I was the one who was fucked up. She was the stable one, the rock. My biggest fear was always that my addiction would eventually push her away, that she would stop loving me. But I never once considered that she would be the one to stray, to seek comfort in the arms of another man, let alone to fall into her own addiction. My entire worldview, the foundation of our relationship, was built on the premise that I was the broken one and she was the one who held it all together. To have that narrative so violently upended has left me completely disoriented. I don't know who she is anymore. And if I don't know who she is, then I don't know who we are. And if I don't know who we are, then I don't know who I am. My identity has been so wrapped up in being her partner, in being a part of this couple, that I feel untethered, lost at sea. The question of whether it was cheating has become a fixation, a semantic obsession. Because if it was cheating, then I am the victim. I have the moral high ground. I am entitled to my anger, my hurt. But if it wasn't cheating, if her argument holds water, Then the lines are blurred. Then it's just another messy, complicated chapter in our messy, complicated story. Then my anger feels less justified, more hypocritical. Her insistence on this point feels like a way to absolve herself of guilt, to reframe her betrayal as a misunderstanding, a technicality. It's a way to avoid taking full responsibility for the pain she has caused. And that, more than anything, is what makes it so hard to forgive. You can't forgive someone who doesn't think they've done anything wrong. I'm terrified for her. I look at her and I see the ghost of my future self if I hadn't gotten help. I see the vacant eyes, the jittery energy, the slow, insidious process of a soul being eroded by a chemical. I know the road she is on, and I know where it leads. And I feel this overwhelming sense of responsibility to help her, to pull her back from the edge. But I am an addict in early recovery. I am standing on shaky ground myself. They tell you in rehab to avoid relationships in the first year, to focus on yourself, to not get entangled in other people's drama. And here I am, not just in a relationship, but in a relationship with another addict, in the midst of a five-alarm fire of drama and betrayal. It's a recipe for disaster, a textbook case of what not to do. Every instinct for self-preservation is telling me to run, to get myself and my daughter to safety. But my heart, my stupid, stubborn, 12-year invested heart, is telling me to stay, to fight, to not give up on the woman I love, even if she is a stranger to me right now. So I'm in this holding pattern, this purgatory. I'm trying to be a father to my daughter, to create a pocket of normalcy for her in the midst of this chaos. I'm trying to hold on to my sobriety, to go to meetings, to talk to my sponsor, to do the next right thing, one day at a time. And I'm trying to figure out what to do about her. Do I give her an ultimatum? Get help or we're done. Do I try to stage an intervention? Do I just wait and hope that she hits her own rock bottom and decides she wants to get clean? I'm playing out a million different scenarios in my head, and none of them have a happy ending. Every path seems to lead to more pain, more loss. Is this cheating? At this point, I'm starting to think it's the wrong question. It's like asking about the color of the deck chairs on the Titanic. The ship is going down, we are sinking. And the real question is there a lifeboat? And if there is there room for both of us in it? Or do I have to save myself and our daughter and leave her to go down with the ship? That's the question that keeps me up at night, the question for which I have no answer. Thank you for listening this story. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Click like and subscribe to the Reddit Whispers for more.